what's going on, folks? We are now several days after the hunt at Daniel's house after we just enjoyed a fantastic dinner with Nilgai.
And a little whitetail.
And whitetail. We did kind of like a compare and contrast Venn diagram sort of situation.
Both delicious, by the way.
Yeah, delicious would be like in that center section.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so normally, I guess compared to the last time we did one of these hunts, we did an episode every day. We were exhausted at night, but we still did it. I don't know if they were the best episodes, but we still did it. We were extremely regular. And this year we didn't. We just were so tired, and then we got back to a hotel room.
But yeah, you got a hotel room with air conditioning and a bed.
And a Seinfeld marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
And drinks and yeah. But long story short, I think we're going to try to go back and Tarantino this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, let's talk about the Nilgai that we just ate.
Yes.
Because I think this is important. So I took a picture, sent it to you, Kyle, and Mario, and I put a whitetail tenderloin right beside the Nilgai tenderloin. And I, for one, was blown away at how big this thing was.
Twice as big.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
And what I found was really interesting is it tasted like beef, like a really, really lean beef. And everyone says that. I'm like, whatever. Everyone's saying that. Then I'm like, man, it kind of tastes like lean beef.
It tastes more like beef than venison for sure.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So we cooked that up, and we cut up some little French baguettes into little slices, put a little cream cheese, a little bit of fried onions on there, and then we put sliced up Nilgai and sliced up venison. It was delicious. That was a good meal,
that's just a go-to recipe
great.
for any stuff like this. It's so good for any very lean cut of meat. Man,
yeah,
that is the way to cook tenderloin.
Yeah. All right, so now we can go back to Saturday. I think it's Saturday.
Yeah,
Saturday morning.
So the last time we recorded a podcast, we were sitting there. I felt like we were licking our wounds, tail between our legs, exhausted, and the next day was kind of more of the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we ever had a bad strategy. I think we went out, and every time we went out there, we had a good thought behind what we were doing. It just didn't work out.
Well, I think the worst part, and I say worst in parentheses because it wasn't bad. Like, it was still a lot of fun, right? But the worst part is I shot that bull 2 hours after legal light on the first day.
Yeah.
So, like, I think the thought process we had was, dude, we're going to clean up out here.
Yeah.
And then it was like,
we went into town and bought 3 coolers, dude. We bought 3 coolers and 100 pounds of ice.
We got a little overambitious.
That's a little bit arrogant, man.
Yeah. And then we just got our asses whooped, like, over and over. And I was telling Pliny halfway through, I'm like, man, even though I shot that bull, first of all, it felt like a week ago, I'm frustrated. Because it's not even that I haven't been able to miss a shot or pull my bow back. Like, we hadn't seen anything in 2.5 days.
Yeah.
And it definitely turned into a real public land, grinding it out type of hunt.
Yep. So to put it all, I guess, in the aspect of time, Saturday morning, we went out there. We felt like we had a good plan. We went out to the spot where we saw the little forky buck, the little 4-point. We're like, well, we saw him come out at night, but we don't know what's happening in the morning. We stalked in, and then as we were going in, we bumped some deer. And
again, this grass is so high. At the lowest point, it's up to your knees. At the highest point, it's over my head.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm 6'4". It's really high grass. There's brush everywhere. And the challenge is, honestly, is that no matter where you go, you can't really be sneaky, right? Like you're coming in, even if you're quiet. And we weren't necessarily quiet going in. We were a little loud.
I think we were just in too much of a hurry.
Yeah. But even if not, I think we would have busted those deer.
Yeah.
Because they were literally on the tree line, and we were sitting 20 yards from that.
And that was the day that it was really windy that morning, so I think the deer were bedded out in the open just because of the wind.
So we walked in, and again, this was probably, 200 yards, 100 yards from, 150, 200 yards from where I shot my bull.
Yeah.
And it was further into, like, the thickness. Pliny had seen this other little field on Onyx. By the way, the show doesn't make money off Onyx. But I will say, Onyx, unbelievable.
If anybody from Onyx is listening, like, hit me up.
Yeah, please, because we will give you guys.
We believe in it.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we found this cool little field. We went over there. That's where we saw that forky. We went back the next day, and we were walking in, and I was walking in front, and I look over, and I hear this like you hear when you bust a deer, and a deer runs, and I look, and I see these two red eyes looking at me because I had the red on my headlamp.
Well, and I have to admit that at first I didn't really believe you because you're like, look, I see eyes. I see a little red dot. And it was a bird.
Yeah, the first one was.
The first one when we were walking in. I'm
first
like,
one was.
Dude, it's a bird.
Yeah.
Come on. And then later we're walking in and you're like, there's something out there. I'm like, oh, okay. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever, dude. Yeah, you shot a bull, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
You're just kind of playing the game now.
No,
so,
but I actually didn't even get a look at it, but based on where we were, based on the conditions, I know a lot of times went into windy deer bed out in the open, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you were positive that you saw deer, and then
we saw another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we sat down and we're like, man, and then this is what happened after that, which was really frustrating. I remember getting a mental picture in my head of Pliny flipping off the woods. So we were probably 200 yards from where I shot that bull, and there was a carcass there. And probably, 20 minutes after sunlight, we start hearing coyotes.
Dude, they were partying.
They were partying.
They were all over that thing.
And then we heard another group of coyotes.
Yeah, it was like their rival gang.
They're like, hey, guys, we found something you didn't. And then about 20 minutes later, we heard another group of coyotes. And so it was just like, man, we're surrounded by coyotes, which, by the way, scares off deer.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there like, what are we doing here? And then we heard something. Oh, that's right. We heard that something crunching on the woods back there.
And at first, I almost thought it was young bucks sparring. Like it almost sounded like antlers lightly cracking together. And then after listening to it a little bit more carefully, I realized, no, that's just brush. That's just sticks. And
it sounded like something just walking on it.
Yeah.
We were thinking, because again, it wasn't too far from where I shot the bull. And if you listen to the other podcast, when I shot that bull, there was a younger bull behind him that was a little smaller. So we're like, man, maybe it's that other bull walking around back there. Because it didn't sound, if you've ever deer hunted, you don't typically hear deer, right? They're very quiet. And when you think you hear a deer.
Either they're the loudest thing in the world because they're rutting and they don't care and they're running through the leaves. Like if you're hunting, I don't know, in Tennessee or anywhere in the East and they're running through oak leaves just making a bunch of noise. They're so loud. Or they don't make a sound.
Yep.
And you just look up and you're like, how did he get there?
And in Texas, it's like you hear an armadillo and you think it's a deer. And it's really not.
Yeah, it sounds like a whole herded deer. Yeah.
So this was like, man, we're hearing sticks break. And I think I leaned over to you at one point. I'm like, dude, is there a hunter back there? Because it's like there's so much noise coming from
It's too
back
loud.
there.
Yeah.
So we ended up not finding it. And I don't know, it's probably mid-morning. We're like, dude, let's bust out of here and go find another spot to hunt tonight. And so we were back in the thick stuff. So the morning before, or the day before, whenever it was, we had seen, or probably actually 2 days before because it was a scouting day, we had seen someone had hung some tape.
Yeah.
And it was probably 500 yards from us on the trail. So we're like, well, let's just go check that out, see if someone's actually over there or not.
And I like how we come up with, there's a few people that we met down at the hunt, but then we almost build identities for everybody else. We're like, oh, it's the Jeep guy. Like that, I see orange tape. Must be the Jeep guy.
He's parked near there. It's the Jeep guy. He's got a cool Jeep, by the way. So we end up walking out to the trail. We walk down, and about halfway down, we found a little tripod.
Yep.
Off on not the same. It wasn't the Jeep guy, but it probably was. It was probably two people. I don't know. We found a tripod. We're like, all right, that's good to know. We keep walking. We come to the corner where we had seen that tape, and we saw it was like a effed up old deer stand or something.
Yeah. Well, I don't know quite what it was. It was like two 6-foot steel pipes and then like a piece of nylon webbing.
It was very strange.
So it's like somebody had tried to do a DIY tripod or something and then they got part of it out, but not. I don't really know what was going on there, but there was no hunter there.
There's no hunter.
Somebody had abandoned that spot, clearly.
So we decided to push back into those woods. And again, keep in mind, this is the same spot that on our scouting day we had seen a Nilgai cow somewhere in that area. So we're like, all right, there's deer here because I saw that big buck. We saw that forky. We heard some deer. We saw a cow. I shot a bull. There was another bull. So we're like, all right, there's animals in this area. Let's push in further and see where they've gone.
And what we had seen in all the days before is that whether us or other people, everything on the edges was getting busted up, was getting pushed around. So our idea was, man, even if it fails, we're going to the middle.
Time to push in.
We're going in deep just to see what's out there, see if it works for us. So that's what we did. And as we started pushing through that, it ended up just being this low, thick mesquite stuff with really tall grass in there. Mesquite flats, that's one thing. But when it's mesquite with all this grass, you just can't be sneaky in there. And we were trying to, and we were walking through the trails, and then suddenly I saw a deer get up and run off. And then,
do those whitetails swishing.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But we got really close.
We did.
We were 30 yards from those deer before they busted us, and that's because we basically just put our faces into the wind. It was a weird wind that day, so we made a point to walk into the wind, which I think strategically was good, but when you're just in that thick grass,
it's so hard.
You can't be totally silent, and even if you are, they were 30 yards from us, and it was still way too thick for a shot.
Yeah. Well, and so we bought snake gaiters. And so the snake gaiters like,
yeah.
And I still would wear the snake gaiters versus not because we saw snakes.
Yeah.
But it was just you're not getting around it being like you're not sneaking up on them on like a white marble floor. Like, it's not happening.
We like to think of ourselves as like Indians running around in moccasins being sneaky.
It's not
but
true.
Just when you're in that, it was literally, well, I don't know about literally, but it was as close to jungle as I've ever hunted in.
Yeah, it was pretty thick. It was pretty thick.
We saw a doe and a fawn run off.
But we found them again, and we ran them off a second time.
Well, and I think we had a good thought. So we pushed another about 50 yards or so, and then when it opened up a little bit, we just sat and waited. Because I've noticed many times whitetail will be just like rabbits. They'll run a semicircle and come back to... They never quite come back to exactly where they were, but they'll run a circle so that they're not dead downwind, and they'll come back, usually facing to the wind or perpendicular to the wind, and come back and want to bed down close to where they were. So we just sat there and waited for a while. They didn't come back in, so we pushed further, again, up north into the north wind, and then we heard them again. I didn't see them that time at all. I just heard something that I'm like, that sounds deer-like.
Yeah.
And I assume it was the same deer. We don't really know. We pushed further, and then we pulled up Onyx again, looked at the map, and saw, hey, there's another little opening up here.
Well, what we also realized is similar to deer, we had kind of done a half circle and came back to the same place we were at.
That's true. That's true. The terrain, it's amazing how much when you follow just the terrain without watching a map or saying, I'm going to head north, you end up kind of ending up at these interesting little openings and these little spots. And you're like,
this looks kind of familiar from
this
the
is
other
why
side.
It funnels wildlife, because it funnels us in the same sort of ways. So we ended up pretty close to that original stand, and then hooked it north after that. Looked on the Onyx maps, saw a bit of an opening, and we said, that's probably a good spot to aim for. Let's head that way. And sure enough, as soon as we got in there.
Dude, this is what's so frustrating, first of all, about bow hunting, public land hunting, and having no clue what you're doing because you're on a new terrain. Like, we're walking through this field, and it's probably 10:30 in the morning. So by now, like, what we noticed is most of the deer were bedding down pretty early.
Yeah.
Like, mornings was definitely the time to see animals.
I would think everything's bedded down by 9.
Yeah. So we're at 10 o'clock. We're like, all right, let's walk through this. And when I say open field, there's about 30 mesquite trees and a couple other trees that we didn't know what they were at the time. What are they? Ashburn trees? What were
Ashburn.
What was it?
Acacia?
Acacia. I knew it started with an A. I was halfway there.
Well, I had to look it up because I'm like, I know what these trees are, but I can't remember. And acacia is interesting because it grows in like Indonesia and Africa and all over the
Just
world
like
in
Nilgai.
these thick jungle places. Yeah.
So we end up walking in this field with all these trees in there, and Plainy's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And he's walking in front, and all of a sudden I see a little spike run by, and then a little basket 4-point, and then a little basket like 6 or 8-point.
Yeah.
Just hauling ass.
And I saw the spike get up, and that's when I was like, okay, hold on, hit the brakes.
Yeah.
Something's happening. And
they didn't see us.
No, I think just because of the wind, the way the wind swirled, I think they smelled us.
And they're probably, 80 yards away, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the sort of thing that I'm like, if I had a 30-30 with open sights right now,
Smoke 'em.
I'd feel pretty good.
Yeah. And again, we're on public land, no antler restrictions. Our goal was, hey, you see a good bodied animal that can get meat off it, take the shot.
Yeah. But when you've got a bow, totally changes things.
Totally
and when
changes
stuff's
things.
moving quick, again, changes things.
If anyone ever wants to go out on a weekend and just frustrate yourself, go buy a bow if you don't have one and sit on public land.
Yeah.
And you'll come back and be like, all right, I want to go sit in my deer stand again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is tough. It is tough. So we went over there, sat for a while, and then this field.
We literally sat in their bed.
Yeah, in their bed.
We're
like maybe
this-
they'll come back.
We're like, here's a spot where bucks are bedded. Maybe they'll loop around. Maybe this is just the stupidest thing ever. But I don't know. They were here, so let's just sit here and see what happens.
And we were walking into the wind the wrong way, and we kind of knew that because we were looking at this field. And so we sat in a position where like, all right, we're on a good wind call now. So if they come back, they won't smell us, hopefully.
Yeah. And from there, we realized, well, the direction they ran, that's worth noting. So we looked at the map and we're like, actually, it's thick for a little bit, but then it kind of opens up there, and there's an irrigation ditch, and there's a road, and this is an area that actually looks really interesting. So maybe our hunt's over for this morning, maybe not, but let's go check that out. So we went and headed north a couple hundred yards, and I just remember it was an open strip, basically, but along the sides of it, it was just thick with trails, sign, trails, everything you can imagine was there. But we never saw another deer. So either we had run them out of there, or they just weren't there at the time, or I don't know what was going on. But we hit this road, we looked around, we hit that irrigation ditch, and we realized, hey, this is actually a pretty good spot. It's right smack dab in the middle of the property. It met our goal of getting into the interior rather than hunting on the edges.
I don't think anyone else was out there the whole time.
And tracks, man.
All over the place.
Nilgai, hog, deer. We saw
Javelina.
all kinds of tracks. So we dropped a pin and said, hey, this is a good spot to be tonight. We poked around a little bit, and then
I felt way better about that spot than the spot the night before, where we're kind of like, well, let's just throw the dice and see what happens. And we ended up running into that older gentleman and his son.
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, we're going to go into a spot tonight that we saw 5 deer within 300 yards.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of sign. I felt pretty good going in there that night. So we ended up heading out, and we went to a Mexican place, got fajitas for $6.99.
Yeah.
And like when I say fajitas, like a plate full of fajitas.
Was that day, or was that when we got brunch? When we got migas and...
It was the brunch day.
Yeah.
I got migas a la Mexicana.
It was the same restaurant.
It was. This restaurant was unbelievable. We saw Bane in there, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, everybody... Not to get too political on this thing, but we don't wear masks. I think most of what we see when we're hunting in all these small towns, people don't wear masks, don't care about all that stuff. That was all last year sort of stuff. But down here where nobody speaks English and it's very like
everyone wears masks.
We were like the only people not wearing masks, probably the only white people.
Yeah.
It was just very different.
And we saw a guy come in, and I'm going to leave it at this. This guy's wearing a mask. I've never seen a mask like this. Like, we've been in this for 18 months now. I've never seen a mask like this. I was actually impressed, and I was wondering how he was going to eat. So he had a regular, like, N95 mask, like the cloth kind of mask.
Yeah.
And then he had, like, this tube coming out of the N95 that went down probably 2 feet or maybe 1.5 feet. And on the bottom of the tube, there's, like, a box. And the box, like, a air ventilation filter. I'm like, dude, this guy's got it hooked up. And it wasn't, when you see like an old guy rolling an oxygen this was
tank.
Like, he was like 35 years old.
It was not that.
Yeah. And look, I'm going to be careful here. I think if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you want to get a vaccine, get a vaccine. If you don't want to, all that, whatever you want to do what you do. I just never seen this before. This was and we live in Dallas. I've seen all kinds I've seen the purple mask, the pink mask, the green mask, the regular mask. This is like a legit, like Bane type elephant mask.
Or like Luke. Luke.
So we ended up seeing that, and that was what drove us out of the restaurant.
Yeah.
So we went back to the hotel. Was that the day we took like a 2-hour nap, or was that the next? No, we watched The Office. The Office had reruns on. I think we watched The Office for like 4 hours.
Yeah. So having a hotel was a blessing and a
Yeah,
curse
absolutely.
for sure. Last year we camped the whole time. This year, even though it was a week later, it was a lot hotter. I don't know why. It was.
Do you think this year was hotter?
I think so.
Really?
Well, I don't know. It was about the same.
See, that's what the hotel does to you.
We had a place to hide from the
That's
heat,
true.
so it makes us judge the heat rather than accept it.
I think the difference was last year we packed our lunches every day and we biked out in the morning, and then we just literally, I know I did, and I think you did. I don't know if I know Kyle was running down the middle of places sometimes.
Well, so I have to say, I packed lunches for all of us the whole time.
We didn't
and
eat 'em.
the only time we ate them was like in the truck one day.
Yeah. By the way, Kyle, I love you, buddy. That story, we were talking about it with the guy at the restaurant. It's like, that guy running after a Nilgai with his bow. Anyway, so I think probably the reason it didn't feel as hot is because back like last year, we just kind of sat out there all day.
Yeah.
And so we were just kind of sweltering. This year, we're like, nah, we're getting out of the heat. Like,
Well,
we're
and
done
we'd
with this.
kind of like scout in the middle of the day and walk around a lot. So
I kind of sat where I was. I felt
Yeah.
like the guy with the long elephant mask. So we went back and watched The Office.
yeah. And then afterwards, we knew where we had just scouted that spot. We knew where we were going to go that evening. So we went back out there.
And again,
And-
dude, I thought like, man, we're going to see stuff.
And it was an interesting spot in that we had an east wind. So
Yeah.
I set up on the north side of the trench. You set up on the south side. I thought between us we would see something. But we really didn't.
I saw an owl. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, I think we probably saw the same owl.
Probably.
Because I noticed it was a great horned owl and
Yeah.
it landed in a tree right by me, and I actually got some cool video clips of it. But the whole time I'm sitting there and I'm watching over this trail that I had found on OnX and then seen where it was, and I'm like, okay, I'm exactly 36 yards from this trail. I feel so dialed in. I'm nestled down in the brush. I felt like it was a great spot, but then guess what? Nothing showed up.
Nothing came. And that's, I mean, again, this is like public land bow hunting, right? Like you can do everything right, and they're not coming through that way that night.
Yeah.
They're just not. And what we noticed as well is the moon was probably like a 3/4 moon most of the time we were out there. So there may have been a lot of animals moving at night, and they may have just not been moving, in the traditional kind of early hours, late hours time of day. They were just hanging out until nighttime.
And I'm definitely not one of those people who believes that the moon affects the rut, but I do believe it affects animal movement in general. And so if you're boogering them up during the day and you're pressuring them during the day, but then there's still a full moon at night, you're basically giving them free rein to run around and move and do everything they can when you're not there. And so I think some of that is what was happening. So we walked out that night after we had sat there, felt like we were in great spots, seen an owl. And I think when we were walking out, we didn't feel like we had made a mistake. I
No.
feel like there were sometimes we were like, I screwed it
Like
up.
the night before, we're like,
Or-
man, we just kind of rushed it and sat on the
Yeah,
trail.
we weren't in a good spot, or the wind swirled, or I played it wrong. I feel like we were in a great spot and played it right, and it just didn't work out.
We saw animals in the area. We were way back in the woods. No one else was there. Tons of trails, tons of tracks, tons of poop.
Yeah,
And we're like, man, we're in a great spot. And it played the wind. It just didn't work.
yep.
And that, again, I keep coming back to it, but like, I can't stress, like a lot of people, I think they think of hunting, especially non-hunters. They're like, oh, you're just sitting in a blind, 50 yards or 100 yards away from a feeder, and you're just shooting at, you're harvesting animals. And there's some of that. And by the way, I have no problem doing that. I did that last week, and I shot 2 does with my son.
Yeah.
It was great, right? This is a very different hunt.
This is why to some degree, I really appreciate getting my ass kicked in early season, so that when I sit there and I shoot a deer over a feeder in late season, I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
But
there's
man-
a difference, man. We were talking about this when we went last weekend. Like, I had my 6.5 Creedmoor, and it's a very accurate rifle, and I shot a doe at 85 yards away. It was the first time my son had come hunting with me,
Yeah.
and it was stupid easy. Like, and look, we had done a ton of work to get it to that point, right? And then we went out there and we sat there for 2 hours before we saw anything. But taking the shot, seeing the animal, It had no clue that I was there. There was no wind problems. There, like none of that was an issue. There was no like, hey, I got to draw my bow back and not have them see me. All of that goes away, and it was just like, man, this is easy. And then you go get your butt whooped, and it's like this is a whole different style of hunting.
Yeah,
and I actually love both of them.
Yeah,
like they're both different.
It makes you appreciate both of them.
Yes.
In its own light more and more. Because I feel like if I entirely did one or the other, I would lose appreciation for the whole spectrum of what hunting is and what hunting can be.
Well, and just so it was great to put meat in the cooler when I shot the does 2 weekends ago. But I was telling Pliny on the drive back, like shooting this Nilgai bull with my bow on public land was by far, and I've only been hunting for a few years, it was by far my favorite and best memorable kill ever. Like ever.
And that's awesome that you can even categorize it and know matter of factly.
Yeah.
Like
and the weekend before
where that point was.
The weekend before, I'm like, dude, I had the best time in the world, right? I was with my son. It was a whole different experience. This was like, dude, this was a really tough hunt and I shot something.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So we ended up going out of the woods.
And that night we went into town, and ironically, the only place you can get a good margarita in this town where nobody speaks English is at like the Wings place.
And by the way, it's not even a good margarita. It's the only place you can get a margarita.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like one of those bar syrup, whatever.
It was just weird. Like we had to order chips and queso or whatever, or chips and salsa instead of just having it brought to us.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
But it was cool. It was in the same strip mall as our hotel, so it was a walk away.
Yeah, we literally walked there and walked back. So got dinner and came back. Probably
watched some Seinfeld.
Yep.
Went from The Office to Seinfeld.
Yep.
And we were talking about this. All right, so I'm going on a tangent. Seinfeld was like kind of my parents' generation, or like right after that. And then I think a major show after that kind of brought everyone together in the country was Friends.
Yeah.
Which I never watched. It was a little older than me.
I watched a little bit of it, but...
And then I think after that, that's when it kind of forked a little bit. And there was like The Office, which was the show that I watched a lot of.
Yeah.
There was like that 70s show. And then it was, what's the one with Shelton?
Big Bang.
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, I never got
Then there's
into
like
that
30 Rock. So it kind of splintered into like kind of, and then after that, like the generation now, I feel bad. Like a show is like five weeks long and then no one talks about it again. Like
and
Game of Thrones, no one cares anymore.
Yeah.
Now we're on to Yellowstone.
Well, yeah, I was up to 2:30 in the morning watching Yellowstone, so
yeah.
I guess I can't say anything.
So we watched a little bit of Seinfeld and they were like, all right, tomorrow. Oh, we forgot the whole part.
What part?
So, all right. So as we were leaving that night, we're driving away.
Oh, that's a good part.
Yeah, this is an important part. And I can't believe we forgot this. This is before the margaritas and everything. So we're driving and we're probably, I don't know, on the track of land we're in, we're probably 3/4 of the way up. So we're driving back towards the road and we see a truck and it's this Dodge Ram that had been parked in the same spot every morning. It's literally 5 yards over the property line.
Yeah.
And it's parked there and there's a trail there.
The first place you can get in.
First place you can get in. And they were parked there every day, every morning, every night. So we're driving by and their lights are on. I'm like, let's just stop and say hello.
Yep.
So we stop and...
Because everybody who had met up until this point was just so cool.
Great
so
guys,
like,
yeah.
Be nice to know, just say hey to these folks,
yeah.
see how they're doing, that kind of thing.
So we stop and I roll down my window. I'm like, hey, how's it going, guys? They're like, oh, we're doing great. And it's this guy, I'm pretty sure it was a father and son. It may have been like an older brother and a younger brother that was like 10 years, 15 years difference. But I think it was probably a father and a son.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think they're probably 25-year different. But we end up talking to him and the guy's like, yeah, we've been out there all week and I don't know the kid's name. The kid was probably 14, 15.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. I'm like, hey, y'all get anything? He's like, yeah, he shot a buck. He shot a little 8-point buck. And dude, this is the coolest thing about hunting. I can't wait till my son is there. This kid was so fired up about shooting a buck.
He was just grinning.
He was grinning. I remember the dad, I'm going to call him the dad because I think he was the dad. The dad's like, yeah, he had his crossbow and I'm sitting there 500 yards away from him on this trail and I hear this thunk. And I'm like, some assholes in the woods with a crossbow.
Who set up right behind me.
And then he's like, and then He texts me, he's like, I just shot a buck. And the kid's like, the whole time the dad's telling the story, the kid's just smiling ear to ear.
Yep.
Having a great time. And it was a good little buck.
Yeah.
It was a really good little buck. So we're talking to them and they're like,
we say little buck. It was an 8-point,
it was a nice buck. Yeah.
13, 14 inch, something like that.
Yeah, it was a good buck. And the kid was super excited. So the dad's telling us, he's like, dude, I saw this monster buck. And he shows us his picture, and it's a monster buck.
A picture on his phone that it snuck up behind him, and he wasn't able to turn enough to shoot, but he was somehow able enough to take a picture. Yeah.
Weird. But that goes back to bow hunting. Like, it's so tough to, like, you can see a deer right on you. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to get your bow on him.
Right.
So we end up talking for a little while, and they're like, hey, we're actually heading out tonight. We're heading out first thing in the morning. And we're like, hey, do y'all recommend if we go back there? Like, dude, there are tons of deer back there.
They basically said, hey, take our spots. Yeah. We're in a good spot.
Yeah. So it's right on the property line. And they're like, hey, there's every single day my son has seen bucks. Like, every day. He's been covered up in bucks. He's like, I've seen bucks. I've seen does everywhere. And so this is the last hunt the next morning for us. And we're kind of like, all right, let's try to get on a deer at least. Let's try to get, a doe or a buck or whatever it is. So Pliny and I leave and we're like, hey, that's good insight. So we mark it. We go to that non-Mexican restaurant where they had margaritas and wings. And we look at Onyx and we're looking at the trail. We're like, oh, this is perfect. We can know exactly where to go. There's a really good spot at a corner. And then about 500 yards up, there's another spot where trails converge. We're like, all right, we're going to sit at those two spots in the morning.
Yep. Well, and we realized part of this, it almost kind of detracts from the mystique of public land, but there was a private hunting ranch on the other side of it that had a lot of feeders.
We're not supposed to talk about that.
Yeah, we're not supposed to talk about it. But I think the deer were living on public.
Yes.
But we knew in the morning there was a good chance they were going to cross over to private and cross back.
Yep.
And compared to our other plan, we're going to go all the way to the heart of the middle property and get as far back in as possible and sit there.
And we're like, wait, there's deer coming into feeders, but it's not we can catch them on the way to breakfast. And
we had just sat at this other spot and not seen anything. So like a spot where we can most likely see something. Well, we should do that.
And keep in mind, like, your whole experience so far for the first 3 days of hunting, like 6 sits, was you saw one forky buck.
I saw one little buck that he was in range at one point, and I was very resolute. And I'm not going to shoot.
Nothing. And all I saw, it was the first morning I saw a great buck and then two bull. And I mean, it sounds like, but it's not a lot. Like, I saw 3 animals that first like within 30 minutes of each other, and then I didn't see anything the rest of the time either.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like, there's deer in the area. There's a reason they're going there. Let's go check it out.
Whatever puts us at the best odds of something, that's probably where we should be. And then that puts it on us, whether it's something we want to kill or not.
Yep.
So that's, I guess, just to go ahead and jump over to there. That's where we went the next morning.
Yep. So we walk over there, and we get to the corner, and we smell something. And we look over, and there's a carcass of a deer. And it was that 8-point.
And we're like, oh, yeah. He just told us about killing one.
Oh, we forgot about that.
That's it right there.
Yeah. So Pliny sets up, I don't know what, you think 30 yards from there? 50 yards from there?
Yeah, 40, 50, something like that.
And so I keep going probably another 300 yards down. And
which I think at the time you weren't excited about. You're like, oh, shoot, it's right here. I guess I'll keep going.
Well, and I had this mentality of like, and I told you about it. So after shooting the bull, I'm like, all I want to shoot is a monster buck.
Yeah.
Like, everything else I don't want to shoot. And then the next day I'm like, all right, I'll shoot like a nice 8-point. Not a monster, but like I'll shoot an 8-point. And the next day I'm like, dude, I'll shoot that forky if he comes back.
Yeah.
And then by this time I'm like, dude, I just want to pull my bow back.
Yeah.
Because again, like, I shot a great bull, but it was literally an hour and a half into our first sit.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, dude, I want to pull my bow and shoot something else.
Yep.
So when we're going in there, I'm like, I'm basically going to shoot anything but a doe.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to shoot a doe. And I'm like, if I see like a decent, even if it's a basket buck, but he's bigger bodied, I'll shoot him.
And I was at the point where I would have been ecstatic to shoot a bow or shoot a doe. Shoot a bow at all. Because I had walked for 6 days in Idaho with my bow and not shot it. And then I had gone in South Texas, shot it once and somehow not killed a deer. And then shot a hog that we tracked for 500 yards that we never recovered. So the idea of shooting my bow and shooting a doe sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah. So we set up, and I guess I'll tell mine first because I think it was a little more exciting.
Yeah, go for it.
So I set up like literally on the trail, right? There's like a I wouldn't even say it's like a truck trail, but it's like a little trail that they had bush hogged out.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there I backed up into the trail probably 5 yards, and there's high grass, and the wind was coming from the south, and so I'm looking towards the south the whole time. And I'm waiting for something to cross over, go into the woods behind me towards the feeder. And so like every probably 10 minutes, I'll take a look up the north side of the trail. So I'm looking, nothing. And then I look over to my right. And if you guys have ever done this thing where like you turn your head so far to the right or the left without moving your body that your vision kind of goes cross-eyed. I did that. So I turned my head to the right to look up the north side of the trail, and I turned without turning my body, and all of a sudden, dude, I see this freaking monster buck. Like, not as big as the day before, but he was an 8-point, but he was wide and tall. He was a real big buck, and I've never shot a real big buck. And I'm like, dude, that's a big buck. Like, that's a really big buck. And he's just staring at me. He's probably 60, 70 yards away. Middle of the trail, just looking at me. And I'm sitting there going like, man, ain't this a thing? Like, I can't do anything about this. And I'm sitting there for probably, no joke, probably 4 or 5 minutes, cross-eyed looking at this thing. I remember a few times I'd like close one of my eyes to try to get a better view with one eye because he was like double visioned.
He was there for that long.
Yeah, exactly. And this thing's just looking at me, and then all of a sudden he starts moving towards me. I'm like, man, he can definitely see me. The wind's kind of blowing that way. It wasn't a strong wind, but he's going to smell me soon.
Yeah.
And he starts walking out. He gets within 40 yards, and he stops. He starts stomping at me. And I'm like, man, this thing knows I'm here. And so he turns for half a second, and I quickly, like, I had my bow. I had my left hand. I'm right-handed. I had my left hand on my bow on the grip, and I had it across my legs. And I quickly, I already had an arrow nocked. I quickly attached my D-loop. And then I twist it up real quick so it's like vertical. And I'm like, man, if this joker keeps coming, if he can turn away for like a second, I can potentially draw on this thing, right? So he keeps walking, and he's probably 30 yards away, maybe 25 yards away. And he's just staring at me. He's doing that thing where he's kind of like moving his head like, do I see you? Do I not see you?
It's like I see something that's up, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should be afraid of it or not.
And we're playing like this game of cat and mouse, and like, dude, I don't, and honestly, this is like one of the first times in my hunting career, I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I have no clue how to play this situation. Like, I feel like I'm in a lose-lose situation right now, but I want to try to make a move, right? And I'm just sitting there like, if I move an inch, this thing's going to run. And so he kind of goes away from the feeders side of the trail and goes into the woods, and he kind of comes back. He stomps at me again, and he keeps looking at me the whole time. And then he turns, and I go to draw real quick.
And I think this was entirely visual too, because you had the wind in your favor.
Correct. No, I didn't have the. No, he was getting my wind.
Really?
Yeah, because he was on the north side of the trail, and it was a south wind.
So,
but the wind,
so it's kind of maybe on the edge of your wind.
Correct. He didn't wind me, but he was. I didn't have like the wind favor.
Okay.
I wasn't downwind or upwind from him. But at one point, he kind of turns for half a second towards the back into the public land, like deep into the public land, and I go to draw my bow because I'm like, I got nothing else. Like, he's gonna run, and he books it, and then he goes probably 30, 40 yards in the woods.
Did you actually draw back?
No, I got about a quarter of the way back, and he was gone.
Okay.
Like, I had no option there, and then I hear him.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that sucks.
It's done.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, it's a good point for me to think about because maybe they're going to come from the north. And so then I'm like, all right, I'm just going to stay on the side. I'm going to push back a little further where I'm going to just completely kill my visibility, which I did. And then I'm like, but, if something comes, I can kind of see through the trees and catch it coming. So,
and I love it and hate it that all this. So I wasn't up there, but I can envision this just because we're not hunting in blinds. We're not hunting in tree stands. You're literally just squatting in tall grass.
And I could promise you, if I had my Sitka gear on, never would have been a problem.
Okay.
So I pushed back into the grass a little bit more.
Wait, you did? I thought.
I had my Badlands gear and I hadn't put my Sitka sweater on yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I pushed back into the brush a little bit more, and probably 15 minutes later, this actually scared the crap out of me. I'm not going to lie. So I'm in this grass that as I'm sitting in it, it's literally over my head. And I've got this V-shaped window through the grass that I kind of made. And all of a sudden I see these two eyes and ears looking at me. And it's a doe. And this doe is literally 5 yards from me.
Dang.
Like close enough where I was like, man, I bet you I could reach out and like pet this thing. And I look over to the right through the trees and I see another doe. So there's two does within 10 yards of me. And granted, I couldn't draw back. And I probably could have made a play on them, but I'm like, nah, I really don't want to shoot a doe. And they were super close. And the one doe gets a little closer to me, the one in the front, and she definitely smelled me. And she all of a sudden, like just in a half a second, is like, I am out of here.
Yeah.
And just books it. The doe behind her is like, whoa. Why is she running? Like, what's going on? And she kind of does one of those like half runs for like 10 yards. She's like, what happened?
I'm running because I'm supposed to, but I don't know why.
I have no, yeah, exactly. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And suddenly I'm like, man, should I shoot her? And like, again, I told you, going like this is a really important thing. Always have a plan when you hunt. Always have a hunt plan of what you're going to shoot, what you're not.
Yep.
So I decided not to shoot her, but she was probably 20 yards from me when she ran into the woods, and she had a broadside shot, and I'm like, and then I passed.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, man, they're all coming from the north, and the entire play here was from the south because it was a south wind. So I ended up moving across the little trail and sitting on the other side. And I sat there for, I don't know, probably 20, 30 minutes. And I saw, I went to stand up because the sun started coming over the trees. Because again, I'm sitting on the other side of the road, so I have the sun in my face. It starts coming over the trees, and I go to stand up to walk across the other side of the road again. Again, guys, I had no clue how to play. Like, I was so frustrated, and then also so like miffed after seeing that massive buck. And I go to stand up, and like 6 deer run across the road from private to public land.
And the only thing I can think is they were hanging out at one of those feeders.
They're all hanging out.
They were done, and then they came back to bed down where they felt safe on on public.
And I totally wasn't paying attention. And it was all does. I saw one little basket buck, but suddenly there's a doe 40 yards from me just standing in the middle of the trail. And so just for fun, I draw my bow back and I get my sight on her, and she didn't move. I was like, dude, I could take the shot. Now, a 40-yard shot on a whitetail, and I'm not an experienced bow hunter. Odds are I probably would have, I don't know, I may, probably 50-50 that I'd have a vital shot on her. Because she's going to jump the string, who knows, right? And I don't, usually I practice 20-yard shots in my backyard. Sometimes I practice 30-yard shots with plenty. I don't really practice 40-yard shots, so that's a long shot for me. So I decided not to take the shot. And she stood there for probably 20 seconds. And I could have taken a shot, but I didn't have the confidence. And I really, again, if it was that monster buck, I would have let it fling, like no doubt about it.
Yeah, you would have tried it.
And then I went and sat back down, and I just kind of sulked for a little bit.
Well, sulking was a lot of what I was doing, I think, about 400 yards south of you. I sat on the corner where the two trails met, and it seemed like a great spot. I could see a little bit to the west, a little bit to the north. I had feeders on private about probably 150 yards behind me. I heard him go off like 4 times.
Yeah, they went off so many times.
And I sat there, and it just seemed so good. I was in a great spot. One point I was crouched down in the grass, then I stood up like I was elk hunting, but I had my back against some real tall grass. So I felt like I was in a good spot. I heard pigs behind me at the feeders. Then I heard something that sounded a little bit different kind of in the brush. And I still right now even think I was hearing a javelina. I'm convinced. Just because it didn't sound like it was at the feeder. It sounded kind of like a pig, but a little bit different. I'm pretty sure it was a little heavy.
Dude, I've never seen a heavy in real life still.
Yeah, but
I'm dying to see one.
It wasn't squealing as much as like a really aggressive grunting, growling.
Well, I remember at one
sound.
point you texted me and you're like, those were pigs. And I heard them too.
Yeah.
And then about 20, 30 minutes later, you go, I think I hear a javelina.
Yeah.
So it was two different, it was very distinct.
And it was coming from different spots
Yeah.
from where I was. But I never saw anything from where I was. And at that point, this is probably after Daniel had seen like 4 deer.
No, it's probably like 10, but.
So I was pretty exhausted. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and head his way.
Yeah.
Sounds like stuff's happening up there. Let me at least slowly sneak up there. And then I saw a little doe run across the trail. And I didn't know if it was a doe or a fawn. And I remember texting you, and I was like, dude, I saw a deer at like 100 yards. I'm going to move that way. And I started creeping up. And then you saw me get schooled by a doe.
Dude, totally schooled.
I was like, I was embarrassed. I was like, you saw me just get owned by that doe.
Look, it was probably 150 yards away, but I saw what I thought was you pulling an arrow out of your quiver and knocking it as a doe was running right by you.
Pretty much. So I saw a fawn on one side of the lane. I was walking up that kind of bush hogged road.
And my only request, by the way, was, hey, I got close to the trail because I'm like, just don't put an arrow through me.
Yeah, I knew where you were. We were good. But I saw a fawn on one side, and so I started getting ready, and then sure enough, the doe started walking right behind her. And it was right when I was clipping on, and I was just trying to like get there. I was trying to clip on and draw back, and then she just looked and spotted me and just blew and ran off. And then the fawn on the other side ran off chasing her, and you just saw me get owned by a doe and a fawn.
And I think I texted you, I'm like, there's a deer in the middle of the road running.
And I'm like, yeah, no crap. Like, that's the only deer I've seen in the last 4 days.
Oh.
I was about to take a 50-yard shot on a doe, and I don't know. I felt a little bit humiliated there, but I also felt like I was going to try it because it was the only opportunity I had. So I started trying it, and then it all happened faster than I expected, I guess. So then I got up to where you were. We hung out. We talked a little bit. And then at that point, we were just, it was kind of Hail Mary at that point.
It was Hail Mary.
We'll walk back. I'll go stand in the thick brush that I'd come from. You'll walk back in the brush, make a bunch of noise. We'll try to do this impromptu drive. Maybe something will come out and run through the trail. And the fact, like, when you're hoping to take a bow shot on something
on a moving animal
at 50 yards,
in like a window of 10 yards,
things are not good.
Yeah,
things are not good at that point. You're really desperate at that point, and I admit I was really desperate. And so you kind of banged some brush around. You heard something.
So I went back there. So I walked from the trail. I walked probably 200 yards into like the thick brush, and probably 30 yards in, I saw just tons of beds, trails, just everything back there. I'm like, man, there's a ton of deer in this area. And I grabbed a mesquite branch and started banging around and stuff. And so I went 200 yards back, and then it was probably 400 yards back to like the other south towards where you had originally sat that I was going to walk. And probably halfway through that, I hear something 50 yards from me. And I look, and then I get closer and closer and closer, and it's probably 20 yards now, 25 yards from me. And I see it had to have been a deer. The grass was probably about 4.5 feet high, so it was up to above my waist.
Yeah, I don't think there were any Nilgai back there.
Well, my thought was maybe it's a pig.
Yeah,
but I heard a deer blow at me, and then I saw something running. I'm like, that's got to be the same deer. But I couldn't see it because the grass was so high, and there was trails. And like I knocked an arrow at that point because I'm like, man, if there's a deer back, and there weren't any antlers, so I'm like, all right, it's probably not a buck. But I knocked an arrow because I was literally 20 yards from it, and I saw the grass moving where it was running, and so I tried to follow it a little bit and just bang, and hopefully it would come out your way, and it just never happened.
And I heard you banging on stuff, and as soon as you passed me, I gave it a little bit, and then I kind of walked out and met you down there, and then at that point I was like, well, that was the trip. We're done. That's all she wrote.
Yeah, that was it.
So walked out, and we got back to the truck, went back to the hotel, packed up.
Well, we did have a delicious breakfast at the hotel.
Yeah, that's true. They hadn't cleaned up breakfast yet because we got back a little bit early, or
I think back by like 9:50 or something.
Yeah, I think maybe the time changed. They had forgot to change their breakfast schedule or something. Who knows? They had breakfast later than they said they would, and we had a great breakfast there before we headed back and took this very long drive back where we listened to Brave New World.
Brave New World, which, by the way, I had no idea. Like, I hadn't listened to that in a while. I forgot, like, how much sexuality is in that book. Like, it's friggin' weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I just remembered a lot of the stuff about the kind of apocalyptic future stuff and, you know, the way the world will work in the future. And I had forgotten that aspect.
We were talking about something, like, on the way down. We're like, or no, it was the trip before when we were in Iran. And we're like, man, I saw a tweet or something, and someone's like, is the world going to be like a Brave New World or 1984 or Wall-E or a mix of all? And so we're like, dude, let's listen to a Brave New World.
Yeah, we need to go back and listen to that
We need to prepare for it.
Yep.
So we started driving back. Man, that was a long drive.
Yeah,
that was long. It was like an 8-hour drive.
Yeah, and hit a lot of traffic on the way back. You were frustrated, I could tell, but...
Yeah, it was after Buc-ee's I got frustrated.
Dude, and that was a funny experience because we had been in the woods. Like, you're just sitting there in complete silence, waiting to hear a bird, waiting to hear a sandhill crane
no
fly
cars,
by, or a stick break.
No planes.
And then we got into Buc-ee's, and it was just like a freaking circus.
We look at each other like you know, wide-eyed, like, where the hell are we? Like, I got to get out of here.
We looked at each other probably like those two does were looking at each other when they're just like, it's too much. We got to get out.
Yeah, exactly. I remember at one point where, like, I felt like that lady in Happy Gilmore, Mister, get me out of here. And then an AC unit fell on me. It was actually in the form of a pulled brisket sandwich.
Yeah. We definitely partook of the Buc-ee's for sure.
Yeah.
But all in all, it was a good trip, and dude, I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. I'm excited that you have joined the ranks of very few who have taken a Nilgai with a bow on public land on opening day.
Dude, unreal.
Like, who can say they've done that?
Not many.
Most people don't even know what a Nilgai is, much less have hunted them.
Well, and that's funny because I texted a bunch of buddies and I sent this picture. They're like, dude, that's awesome. What the hell is that thing?
And then I guess to wrap it up, so you took it into the taxidermist.
Yeah. So we caped it out, and we caped it at basically the mid stomach line.
Yep.
And it was actually kind of interesting. So Pliny had told me about this taxidermist. The last one I had done, we shot an access, and it was on a high fence. And I'd never done a high fence hunt. I really wanted to do one. I really wanted to get an access. Beautiful mount, but it didn't feel like a real hunt because it was on a high fence. And anyway, there's another podcast on that. So that was like 4 hours from here. He did a great job. I'm like, man, I don't really want to take it to him though because he's so far away. And Pliny's like, hey, I got this guy that's like 40 minutes from here. And so I called the guy after we had shot the Nilgai.
Well, it was the guy who did my fallow that I got with my bow and the best buck I've ever gotten. He just did a great job.
Yeah.
And he views it. It's just a one-man shop.
Yeah.
He's not fast. He's not the cheapest, but he views it as an art, and I think he gives it the attention and the respect that it deserves.
And to that point, so I went up and met him. I took my kids and my wife, and they were hanging out in the truck. And this guy, really good guy. He's a talker. He used to be an ex-cop. Really cool guy, though. So we're talking for a while, and he's like, I told him about the whole story. He was super fired up. And I was like, hey, dude, I'm going to apologize to start this. Like, this animal, we shot him like in the middle, like half a mile into public land. And we did the best we could caping him. There's meat on there still. There's grass. There's dirt, but he's not wet. I try to keep him not wet. He's like, dude, don't even worry about it. Like, that's awesome. Congratulations. He's only done 2 other Nilgai mounts, but they're
really,
they're both his brother-in-laws.
Okay.
And he, so we're talking, and I showed him a picture. I'm like, hey, there's all these mounts that I was looking at, and I'd love your take. So the Nilgai I shot. So if you Google a Nilgai right now, and you go to Google Pictures, you will see a monster freaking bull Nilgai that's real, like, gray.
Like dark bluish gray.
Bluish gray. Probably got scars all over. That's not my Nilgai. That's probably a 700-pound monster Nilgai. I shot probably a 375 to 400 pound Nilgai. I have no idea age wise what age he was, but he's not a monster, but he's a really, really freaking big animal. And mine, unlike those real gray ones, and I looked at a bunch of pictures, he's got a mane, which is really interesting.
The mane's dark, but his skin is more...
It's more dark brown.
Yeah, not tan like a cow.
The cows are tan. This guy was dark brown, not gray.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, I want a mount that kind of shows that mane, because the mane was really cool. Like, I thought that was a really unique part of this animal. And so he's like, yeah, you need one that's kind of looking away a little bit, not a straight on. He told, I don't know if I even told you this. He's like, don't get the one that's like just a straight shoulder mount. Get one that's kind of looking to the side so I can get some of the mane on it. And then he's like, did yours have a bunch of scarring on it? I'm like, no, he didn't. Because, again, I think he was a younger bull. He's like, my brother-in-law's, one of them was just all scarred up. Like, he'd been tons of fights and all this stuff. So we ended up, I ended up dropping with him. He was actually really excited about it because he's like, yeah, I don't see a ton of Nilgai. They're cool animals. He was excited. So we drive back, and then I think this is probably the coolest part about all this. In my garage, there were at one point 5 coolers.
two whitetail and a Nilgai, all aging.
That Nilgai takes up a lot of room. So I was aging all those, and then Pliny and I were talking. We're like, "Hey, let's do this podcast tonight." So Pliny came over, and this is the best part about hunting. We took one of the back straps, one of the tenderloins of the Nilgai, one of the tenderloins of the whitetail that we shot together with my son, and we cooked them both up tonight. And it was really cool. The tenderloin on the Nilgai was almost the size of like a backstrap of a whitetail doe that's like 90 pounds.
Yeah,
it's a big backstrap. So we ended up cooking those up, and to do this podcast, we had 2 Miller Lights left. Those 2 Miller Lights were in the cooler that the head that I dropped off at the guy's place to get processed or to get the mount was. And that's what we've been doing as we've been kind of giving this story.
So like, this is the ultimate concluder, I guess.
It's gotta be.
The last 2 beers that traveled with the cape in this cooler with an animal head.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this thing up in style, man.
Yeah, that's it.
So all in all, it was a fun hunt. It was a tough hunt. I'm super proud that you got a bull.
Thanks, man.
You went from a guy who was just excited to kill a little whitetail a couple of years ago to a guy who is, like I said, joined the ranks of few people who have killed a Nilgai bull on public land. It's the sort of hunt I would do it again.
Yeah, but we probably will.
Yeah, we probably will. Hopefully with rifle, because we just burned all our points for archery, but I've got some points for rifle.
One quick aside on that. I don't know that rifle helped us this time.
Not here.
Every shooting lane was 50 yards max.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, hey, if I had a rifle, I would have knocked down 5.
I was wishing I had a shotgun.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, which is really, I don't really like the idea of deer hunting with a shotgun.
Yeah.
But I think this would have been the perfect terrain for it. So it was interesting, man. It was an adventure going basically down to Mexico, hunting these crazy devil horses that most people have never seen nor heard of. And you got one.
Yeah.
And then, man, it just incited a fire in me that I have struggled this long. Generally, by this point, I've got 2 deer in the cooler.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as being a bad hunter. I'm not necessarily the best trophy hunter, but usually I've got something down by now. So at this point, for me to not have anything down, it's a little bit bothersome. But this next weekend, I'm going to go out back down to the lease with a rifle. I'm going to bring the bow and the rifle, and
I feel bad for the deer on your lease.
Yeah,
honestly, they're in trouble.
Things are going to turn around, I think.
Yeah, I think you put your 270 in your hands. Watch out.
Yeah, it's going to change.
Yeah,
but man, what an adventure.
Yeah.
So if anybody is wondering about this stuff, this public land, this Nilgai hunting, prepare to get your butt kicked.
Oh,
I'm going to be honest. Embrace the suck. It's going to be challenging, but in the long run, you'll be better for it.
It's a lot of fun. It is an ass whooping. Go do it.
It was a blast. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story, all 3 parts of it. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.